How did you get to New York City?
I moved here a month after graduating from college because I got a job at the Wall Street Journal. So I wrote for the Wall Street Journal for a year. I was on the op-ed desk, and that is how I got here. And I didn't fully conceive of the fact that I was moving to New York, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's how I got here.
Was New York always on your roadmap, or this was really because of the job?
That's a really good question. I think deep down, I always fancied myself moving to New York because it was the cool thing that I saw people doing in movies and films and TV shows all the time. So there's also like this thing that exists within my lineage. I'm African American, so like there's this whole story of people moving from the South to the North. I'm from New Orleans originally.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe subconsciously I did, but it wasn't so explicit to me when I was younger.
You always wanted to be a writer? Was that the goal from early childhood? How did that happen?
I don't know. When someone's a child, do they like really know what they want? I have no idea.
How about a high schooler?
I know I was always drawn to literature, and I always wanted to write well. And at a certain point, I realized that I did write well because I was put in gifted in reading and writing. So I don't know. I don't think I necessarily had the desire to be a writer as an adult, but I knew I enjoyed writing and I enjoyed reading as well. And I think those two things help make for a good writer.
Did you like to write about anything specific, or just the act of writing itself you found enjoyable and fun?
When I was a teenager, I actually wrote screenplays.
Really?
Crazy. Yeah. Yeah. They were mostly all terrible, but I had a desire actually to be a filmmaker, and specifically in the world of filmmaking, screenwriting was something that really drew me in. I haven't exactly made sense of that, of what the meaning of that is. And also, I think that it will be some chapter in my life where I will end up writing a film or a TV show or something. Like I could sense that. But yeah.
Did you do extracurricular writing in high school, or was it mostly, personal writing for yourself? Was it ever public?
It was mostly personal, but have you seen the film Fame?
No.
Okay, then it doesn't matter. Okay, so basically, I went to a regular high school for half the day. This is in 11th and 12th grade. For half the day in New Orleans. And then I went to a high school called NOCCA, which stands for New Orleans Creative Center of the Arts, which if you want to be a dancer, if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a filmmaker, if you want to be a musician, you can go and study your craft for the remaining half of the high school day. So that's what I did for 2 years, and I was in the film program, and they teach you everything in the film program, from cinematography to audio production to screenwriting. It was really, really epic. But in that world, I also had to write scripts, and my teachers saw the scripts and my classmates saw the scripts. So I wasn't only private.
Tell me about New Orleans. Is your family from there?
Yes.
Going back generations? What was it like growing up there?
Growing up in New Orleans was really strange. So I'm trying to see how to explain this. I guess I'll just go into it. So New Orleans is probably the witchiest place in all of America. Let's start there. Have you been to New Orleans?
I have, yeah, a couple times, but people who know it far better than me have come out with very similar explanations of the place.
So it's basically the witchiest place in all of America. It's very spiritual. It's got deep cultural amalgamation. It's very culturally mixed. It's got the African element, the Spanish element, the French element. It hasn't really been Anglified in the way other cities in America have been. So it's very witchy. It's very spiritual. And the way that I make sense of my personal story is that my parents decided to try and protect us. I'm one of 5 girls.
Wow.
Try to protect us from that witchy shit by being extremely dogmatic in a Christian way.
Really?
Yeah. So what that meant practically was that in a city whose cuisine runs on shellfish, My parents decided that because the Bible in the Old Testament says not to eat shellfish, that we weren't going to eat shellfish. So it created a kind of insider-outsider like identity that I grew up with in New Orleans. I was inside the culture, but I was also always outside of the culture. I could bore you to death with many stories that like point to this phenomenon that I grew up in. So it was very strange to give you the quick answer.
The witchy component
All
of
of
New
it.
Orleans. What were your parents afraid of exactly?
I don't know, because I'm what I'm doing right now is giving you a description that was never like explicitly communicated by my parents. This is like me guessing.
Yeah.
But New Orleans is very like it's a beautiful city. It's an incredibly rich city in terms of its culture, but it's also there's a lot of crime in New Orleans. There's a lot of there's a lot of what you might call darkness in New Orleans as well. So I imagine, two parents raising 5 girls wanted to protect us from some of those darker elements, let's say, of the city, is my guess.
Were you guys there during Katrina?
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any strong memories. I'm sure you were much younger then, but tell me about that.
Well, I remember my grandmother at the time worked for the VA hospital. So when the storm made landfall, we actually left our house and stayed in the VA for a week and a half as the storm made landfall. And then once the storm made landfall, all of the city was basically underwater.
Yeah.
And these military trucks came to evacuate us. So we were put on military trucks, and then we were driven to Zephyr Stadium, which is the baseball team for New Orleans, and then we were put on buses. And some buses went to Houston, some buses went to Alexandria, Louisiana. The bus that we were on went to Alexandria, Louisiana. I was 11 years old at the time. I stayed with my family in Alexandria for a year, so I spent 7th grade up north, essentially, and my grandparents still live there to this day. But our house wasn't destroyed. We got a foot of water, but we have a basement, which most homes in New Orleans don't have basements, I don't think. So our house wasn't destroyed, and we were able to return a year later.
How did that change the nature of living there, the pre and post experience of being in New Orleans?
I don't know that I was old enough or cognizant enough to tell the difference. Like, again, I was like 10, 11 years old when it happened. And so like my sense of awareness was a 10-year-old awareness. So if I had been an adult, I think I would have been able to make greater sense of what was going on or of the changes, like track the changes. But because I was like 10 years old, I didn't really clock it, Was the fear palpable within your experience? The fear was palpable when I got onto the military truck, but it was still too mysterious for it to be overwhelming.
I want to go back to you in high school going into filmmaking.
Okay.
Did you go to college to continue that interest? What's the story of what you did after you got out of high school? So
I majored in film and then I switched majors.
Did you stay in New Orleans?
Yeah, I went to the University of New Orleans.
Okay.
I majored in film for 2 years, and then I switched to international studies in 2013, I want to say. And the reason why I switched is because at the time I had a real interest in geopolitics, and I also had a real interest in like Middle Eastern conflict, and I wanted to be able to study that without having to do extra credit. so I switched majors, and then later ended up at the Wall Street Journal as a result of taking that track. How did the Wall Street Journal opportunity come about? So one day I was trying to see actually how to enter into this story. So my parents, my father in particular, probably still is a fan of Bret Stephens, who used to write at the time at the Journal and now writes at the Times. And so like I became interested in reading Bret Stephens as a result of that. And then I found out that Bret Stephens was coming to town to speak, to New Orleans to speak. And so I saw him speak, and then I walked up to him and I was like, hey, I'm a fan of your writing. And I don't know. I said something like that. And then he gave me his card. And then he was like, be in touch. I was like, okay. And so I was writing like these blogs at the time. And I emailed him. And he was like, yeah, send me your stuff. So I started to send him my stuff. And then he was like, he would like give me feedback on the pieces that I wrote. And then senior year in college, he told me, there's this program at the Wall Street Journal that you should apply for, because it is good for writers and it's good for like post-college writing. And if you get it, then you will be at the Wall Street Journal for a year at least. So you should apply for it. And at the time, I didn't put two and two together. I didn't realize that Bret Stephens being like the head of this program is basically just like, if you apply, then you'll probably get it, you know? And I didn't really realize that. And which is very sweet, you know, in retrospect. And it's very like, I was nervous. I was like trying to make sure my writing samples were good, but I got in. So, and then I ended up at the Journal.
What was the experience like there?
It was pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's in the middle of Manhattan. It's 48th and 6th, so you're right next to Times Square. That was my first experience of New York City. It was like getting on the subway, leaving Brooklyn, and going into the belly of the beast, right across from Rockefeller Center, right? And just writing. And I remember pitching my first idea and it being received well, and then Bret telling me to write about it, and I wrote about it, and it was published in like 2 days. It was like 2 or 3 days after I got there. I had my first piece published in a journal, and that was epic. Also, when you're at the Journal, you can call anyone and be like, hey, I'm with the Wall Street Journal. Can I talk to you about X, Y, and Z? And it doesn't matter what X, Y, and Z is. At least this was true at the time. They will say yes because you're at the Journal. It's so cool.
What was the first piece about?
The first piece was about Rachel Dolezal. Do you remember her?
No.
Okay, so Rachel Dolezal was this, she was this white woman who was pretending to be black.
Yes.
Yes. And this is like 2015. Yeah, 2015. And I wrote this piece called What Ralph Ellison Would Tell Rachel Dolezal. So Ralph Ellison is the author of this incredible 20th century novel called Invisible Man, which is about this black man who is not really, doesn't feel like he belongs anywhere he goes, whether where he is predominantly white or predominantly black. He feels like his suchness as a human being is like not really honored. And so he ends up going underground and telling his story from that perspective. And the piece that I wrote was about imagining the advice that Ralph Ellison, the author of this book, would give to Rachel Dolezal about like needing to be herself and accept herself.
Did writing at that time seem like this is now what you want to be doing with your life?
I think in the beginning, like in the very beginning, like maybe for the first 3 months. But there was something about the Wall Street Journal's like choreography that is probably true of most newsrooms. That's just not my choreography. Like the idea of having to get in, having to find a piece of interest on a weekly basis to write about that isn't sourced from me personally, but like has to fit within a particular category. Like I don't really care to do that, you know.
Did that begin to clue you into the fact that you're not long for this world? That this is not going to be your long-term career trajectory? Yeah,
especially when like there was a moment near the end of my time there when like the chief editor was speaking to all the interns and like interviewing them and asking them about their like how they felt. And I didn't feel any particular pressure to actually like try and get a spot, you know, that would take me past the year. That's really when I knew.
What did you do next?
So for the first 3 months, this is context. For the first 3 months, I wrote op-eds, and then for the remaining 9 months, I actually worked on this thesis on how to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Wow. Okay.
I really rounded out my major there. And I called it the theory of enchantment. And after I left the Journal, I worked for an organization based in Jerusalem. I was still here, though. I was based in Jerusalem, like tinkering with my thesis and spreading the concepts of the thesis around the world, which essentially said there's 3 principles we have to follow. We have to treat people like human beings, not political abstractions. We have to criticize to uplift and empower, never to tear down or destroy. And we need to root everything we do in love and compassion. So for 2 years, I worked for an organization where I literally like lectured around America and Europe on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict using, excuse me, those principles as organizing principles. So that's what I did for the next 2 years. And then after that, I just went off on my own and created Theory of Enchantment as its own company, as its own for-profit company. And I ran that company for 6 years and primarily in like B2B, teaching companies inclusion and belonging.
How did you have the chutzpah to actually go off on your own? Did you already have business connections and guaranteed work that allowed you to have the confidence to actually go off on your own? That could be a daunting task.
There's this great quote from one of my favorite movies. So the movie is called Amazing Grace, and it's a true story of William Wilberforce, who was one of the abolitionists and English, and one of the characters who's played by the great Benedict Cumberbatch says there are some things in life. What does he say? He says there are some things in life we are too. I hope I get this quote right because it's so good. There's some things in life that we are too ignorant to know we cannot do, so we will do them anyway. It's like something like that. It's like I didn't realize how daunting it is to start your own thing. It was like just the next logical step, you know, if that makes sense. Because I was kind of like, I was asking people for advice for what to do next, and some of the feedback I received was like, these principles are really powerful, and the lectures that you've given are really powerful, so consider making an entire course out of that. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that. And then I did that, and then, you know, there was a period between the end of my 2 years at this organization, let's say it was December of 2018 and March of 2019, where I didn't have any work. I had received, you know, severance, so I was living off of income, which was lovely. Highly recommend if you can get severance. It's amazing. And then just tinkering. You know, I had space to tinker and to experiment. And at some point I had created the course, and I was literally looking for hundreds of thousands of the emails of presidents of universities and just like sending them emails, cold emailing these professors like, hey, I'm Chloé Valdry and I have this thing that would be good for social emotional learning. Do you want to like put it in a class at your university? Mostly crickets, by the way.
Yeah, of course.
But also at the same time, I was showing up on podcasts. And I was entering the airwaves through the podcast world. And at some point, I want to say it was like early fall of 2019. I had shown up on Bret Weinstein's podcast.
Sure.
And a few months later, someone at the FAA emailed me. And she was like, we heard you have an inclusion and belonging thing. We will pay you a significant amount of money to come do a half-day workshop. It's just like I can't, in fact, really tell you where it came from. Yeah. You know, I could hypothesize that it came from this podcast, the fact that I was showing up on podcasts and stuff, and I was also tweeting at the time. So you know, a little goes a long way. But I can't. It's not. It wasn't so like if A then B.
That was the first major business opportunity.
Yeah, was in like early fall of 2019.
Did that
unsolicited?
Yeah, they reached out to you.
Yeah.
Did that begin to gain momentum over time? I mean, that's not that long before COVID, so we're getting to a screeching halt, I'm sure, sometime soon.
Yeah. So that was the first and probably only big thing that happened in 2019, business-wise. And then COVID happens the following year. Yeah. But also Black Lives Matter happens the following year. And it turns out in retrospect that I had been practicing swinging my bat for 2020, because 2020 ends up being this like ridiculous income of interest and income to Theory of Enchantment. Because when George Floyd is murdered, Black Lives Matter protests are happening. You have Ibram X. Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist. You have Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility. And then you have me saying that their approaches are bullshit and the Theory of Enchantment is better and more humanizing. And here are the 3 principles. Like, let's practice, right? And so companies that were looking for an inclusion and belonging sort of training in response to what was happening, but in a mold that wasn't of Ibram X. Kendi's sort of brand or Robert DiAngelo's brand, started finding me. And so 2020 and 2021 ended up being really these like huge, like the feast in the feast or famine sort of mode.
How would you, I'm sure you're asked this all the time, but the primary way in which you would contrast your approach to their approach, this seems almost like ancient history now.
It does, doesn't it? Isn't
It
that
does,
crazy?
when it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
But how would you describe that?
I would say that their approaches, and I would actually love to talk to both of them if you're listening, Ibram X and Robin. I would say their approach is very reductive. So James Baldwin, he has this essay called Everybody's Protest Novel, which if you enroll in the Theory of Enchantment course, it's like the first thing you have to read. And Everybody's Protest Novel, basically, he's criticizing protest novels. He's criticizing these novels that were written in order to protest injustice. So he criticizes Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, and he also criticizes Native Son. Native Son was written by a Black man, right? Uncle Tom's Cabin was written by a white woman. I find it fascinating, like that parallel. Richard Wright wrote Native Son. And so he criticizes both of these novels. Even though both of these novels were written in order to combat racism, he says that these novels perpetuate stereotypes of both Black people and white people and fail to really not just take into consideration the depth of the human being, but to really contend with the what is ultimately the mystery at the heart of what it means to be human. And I would extend that same critique to Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo. I think their theories were very like reductive, and ultimately they ultimately are very, I don't see a celebration of the human spirit in their in their takes. I do have a theory about why there was such strong gravitation, actually, which has something to do with an interesting overlap between like Protestant ideas and BDSM, which we could get into. We could get into it if you want to, but like that's a separate theory.
Did you eventually leave that world behind, or did the enchantment work continue for years after the phenomenon of George Floyd, what happened to him, and the swell of interest in these topics? Did you continue with that into the 2022, 2023 years? Yeah,
I did it for 6 years. So from December of 2018 to basically January 2025, I ran Theory of Enchantment. And then the second election of Trump happened, and then Doge cuts, and that affected me because a lot of the organizations I was serving were nonprofits, were receiving funding from the government, and the Doge cuts just slashed anything and everything that mentioned essentially diversity, equity, and inclusion. It didn't matter that my approach was like an alternative approach, but I ran it for 6 years.
How was the feedback that I know, I'm sure it was very different for all those years and all the presentations that you gave, but generally speaking, how were you received? How was your message received?
I was received very well. Yes. For the most part, I was received very well. People were really appreciative and grateful for the Theory of Enchantment, and were hungry to be a part of the conversation in a way that didn't make them feel like ostracized or, shamed or estranged. So it was received very well.
Where did you, as you look back on the ideas for the work, did you have inspirational figures that you look to that you think you're kind of embodying in the work that you were doing?
Definitely. I mean, all of the people whose works I included in the course. So like Baldwin, Maya Angelou, Carl Jung, there's so many figures and wise people from the culture that I sort of like collected as a repository of wisdom and then turned into a course. So there was everyone from philosophers and, psychologists to musicians and especially singer-songwriters and Disney as a repository of wisdom on the human condition. It was pretty, I mean, it still exists in a certain form, and it is a pretty cool thing. Yeah.
I'd love to give you a little bit more time to just flesh out anything else that should be said in your mind of why you think this was received so well and what about it is, if you agree with this, evergreen about...
I hope it's evergreen.
conflict resolution and dialogue, etc.
So I would say that the hardest teaching that I continue to teach and learn myself, that was part of the program, was this idea that in order to really sustainably combat racism, you have to do shadow work. So you have to learn how to meet the dark parts of yourself and love those parts of yourself so that you stop projecting them onto other people. Or so that you like consciously project. There's another way you can sort of enter into that conversation. And I think that it cut so... It rang so true because the modalities, like the teachings I was telling people, the thing I was telling people to do is like, you have to love yourself. And the truth is that is very difficult for most human beings. I would say probably for all human beings. It's very difficult for us to love ourselves. And it takes a lot of work in a society where we've been conditioned not to love ourselves to work on that and to train in that way. And so people really felt that. And felt the sacred intention behind that. That's what I say is the essence of why people gravitated towards it so strongly and why people were grateful for it.
This is a big question, but how do you think the culture writ large right now is doing in relation to these subjects?
Well, it's funny, this year I actually deleted all social media off of my phone. So I'm less aware of what the culture is doing. And I'm really happy about that. So I'm going to turn that question back to you. What do you think?
I've done the same thing.
Oh, really? So we're both in the dark. I
think I've just prioritized over time in my life more of the micro over the macro. My micro world and trying to take ownership over what's in front of me versus the being a little bit more seduced by these macro trends, which I don't think I don't think they're unimportant
for sure,
but they are outside of my reach typically. And I don't think, generally speaking, my addictive tendencies to things like Twitter are making me a better person. Personally,
I think that's well said. I deleted my Twitter last year. I had over 100,000 followers. And in the fall of last year, I was like, this seems bad. So I just pulled the plug and deleted it.
How much of a lead up was there to you finally being like, it is time to get rid of this? Was it a bit of like an impulsive decision?
I think after Elon...
It had been a rot for a while.
I think after Elon purchased it, things started to take a turn. And then it was just... I don't know what happened in November of last year, besides the obvious thing that happened in November. Well, the re-election of Donald Trump. Maybe that had a subconscious impact on my decision, but like, it just became very clear that it wasn't worth my time anymore. That my trying to plant a flag in the world of love and compassion on Twitter, just at some point, if you are in a cesspool, and there's no like overwhelming sanitation you can bring to the cesspool. You should leave the cesspool, or else if you stay there too long, you will get absorbed. You know, and I think I was like very cautious of being absorbed by that cesspool.
Have you found fertile ground elsewhere?
Substack is wonderful.
Tell me about that.
So I now write on Substack, and I occasionally write essays. I've been writing a lot of poetry lately, actually, on Substack. But Substack is great because it doesn't have it doesn't have infinite scroll. It does have a scroll, but it's not infinite in the way that Twitter and Instagram are. I also don't have it on my phone. So there's like friction that actually exists between me having an idea and me being able to post, which is fantastic creatively because it forces me to be with the thing that I am molding, and in this case a poem or an essay. It forces me to be with it longer so that I can marinate, and then I can post, which creates for better art. So it also, you know, you can make money on Substack. Yeah. And if you want to leave Substack, you can take all of your subscribers with you. You have access to the email list. So it's really, I would say, pro-creator. Like it's creator forward. It's creative forward. And it isn't based upon, its success does not require like these really unhealthy consumption, you know, things that we have fallen into on other platforms.
Do you feel in alignment with the work you're doing now that it just feels right, or it feels like a better, I don't know, more sustainable, enduring use of your time and mind?
I hope so. The truth is that, you know, after the Doge cuts with, you know, this administration, there is like a financial question that I'm contending with in this transition from being a business owner in the traditional sense of the word to being an artist. That's the transition I'm making and have been making all year. And I do have this sense that it's going to work. And I'm not just writing poetry. I'm, you know, making music. I'm in DJ school right now, and I'm taking that very seriously. So I'm really entering into the arts more committedly, and I'm taking my own advice seriously. Like with the theory of enchantment, one of the things I kept saying was like, you have to learn how to fall in love with the mystery of being, right? And there's a lot of mysteriousness around becoming an artist because your income is not guaranteed, right? And you have to really wrestle with the myriad of emotions that rise and fall within you when you see things happening the way you want, things happening the way you don't want. Like, to be an artist, I am learning, is not something that is pomp and circumstance, right? It's not fanfare. It's not celebrity. It might come with celebrity at some point, but those are two very different things. Yeah. And I'm really grateful for this time and experience to be learning that. So time will tell, but I have a feeling it will, and it has sustained me through thick and thin. And this has been a pretty tough year for me. I don't know about you, but it's been a pretty gnarly year.
Well, I like to ask artists that I meet about how they survive in the city, and especially if you have been in business and it sounds like you had some years that were fairly prosperous, how you have dealt with that, and tactics or strategies or even just mentality shifts that have been helpful for you to, if this is the case, be able to deal with the fluctuations in income that come with making a major change like you're doing right now.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll start by saying this. The biggest fluctuation that I've been dealing with this year has not been financial. It has been spiritual. And what I mean by that is I told my parents that I'm bisexual this year, and they disowned me. And so
I read your essay about that, by the way.
Oh, cool. Yeah. What'd you think?
I thought it was great.
Thank you. Everyone should read that essay. It's on my Substack. I think it's called No Kings, if you see it. Yes. I'm really proud of that essay. So that has been the biggest emotional lesson. And it's been hard. It's been really chock full of sorrow and anger and a whole other host of emotions. And what's so paradoxically cool about that, and I don't say this to like romanticize it because it's not romantic, but what's paradoxically cool is that these are precisely the emotions that make for great art. If I can alchemize them, right? That's a big if. That's a big if. And what I've come to realize is that all of the training and teaching that I was doing during Theory of Enchantment, that was actually practice for this moment in my life. And so, yes, I have fears around financial scarcity and financial success, and I want to be financially successful. I aim to be financially successful through my art. And there are moments when I tense up, when I see things are more in a famine situation than a feast. And at the same time, I feel very grateful to have practices and mindsets and ways of being that I've been practicing for the past 6 years that help sustain me through this very difficult time and that help me produce art. I cannot overstate the lesson that I am learning in this year and what it truly means to be an artist. Because I feel like my old self, you see actors and singers and you see them, you see the way they live, you see their lifestyle, and you only think, oh, the celebrity, but to really be an artist, especially, the kind of artist I would like to be is in the realm of poetry and music, primarily. To be an artist, you have to be an artist in any sustained way, you have to be grounded. You have to be connected to something deeper than yourself, something greater than yourself, and you have to really connect to the fact that yourself is a part of that greater whole. So it's this constant oscillating between like awareness of the larger earth beneath you that holds you and sustains you. At least this is how I make art. This is what sustains me. This is the mindset that sustains me. It's like awareness of the greater earth that holds me, and also awareness of the fact that the manifestation of the earth that is me is also spectacular. And it's sort of oscillating between those two realizations and a remembering of those two aspects when I'm feeling both joy and pain.
You mentioned earlier about your parents and how religious they were and how they were trying to shelter you from the witchy aspects of New Orleans. And I think you allude to this in your post about coming out as bisexual to your parents. In whatever way, if you're comfortable, I'd love to hear about how that went down. And you already mentioned that that your parents disowned you, which I've met people who have been through this before. I mean, it must have been extraordinarily difficult to go through that. Maybe not fully unexpected, but I'd love to give you an opportunity to talk about that, about how it went.
So at first I wasn't sure I was going to tell them, but because I'm a public writer and I had already written about it on my Substack, something in me was like, you have to tell them. Also, something in me was like, Chloe, your parents taught you to, they taught you like one of the 10 commandments is honor your mother and father and to tell the truth. And it's like, okay, well, in order to do the honorable thing for me would be to actually tell them the truth, not for them to like hear through the grapevine that this happened. So I told them, and I told my mom because my dad wasn't on the phone. I basically told them that I wanted to tell them something and I was going to call them. And then my dad was like, okay, I might be at work. If I'm not available, just tell your mom and she'll tell me. I have a feeling he had a feeling, to be honest. And he just is avoidant, right? So anyway, I told my mom, and from that moment on, my mom was like, it's very much in this like dogmatic Christian fundamentalist mindset where it's like, oh, well, I hope that you see the error of your ways sort of response. But she was at the time still speaking to me. But from the moment I told my mom, my dad stopped speaking to me. And I told her in May. So I haven't heard from my father since May. And my mom and I were still speaking, but when we would speak, she would say these things that were very biting and mean and unkind and like really cruel. And so we were going to speak this was 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. We were going to speak. She texted me to talk, and I was like, hey, I think maybe we should take a break because the last time you said some things that really made me feel small. She said, for example, I can't go back to my childhood home. Like I can't see my parents. I can't speak to them, and I cannot go visit my house. And she said at the time that if I wanted to talk to her in New Orleans, it would have to be outside the house. So that was one of the things that she said that made me feel really small, obviously. And so I said this to her, thinking that she would respond by saying, okay, sure, let's take a 2-week break or something. But what she actually said instead was, actually, I was calling to tell you that we can't even meet outside the house. And I hope you see the error of your ways, and way worse religiously coded language than that I will not repeat. And again, this was 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. So yeah, it was hard, and it remains hard.
What do you make of their reaction? I mean, was this a surprise to you or not particularly?
My father's response doesn't strike me as surprising. It does still strike me as cruel, but it doesn't strike me as surprising. He can be an inward, like he can go inward, and he can be super introverted. And yeah, but my mom's response, I find, I didn't suspect that from my mom. It was also a delayed response, right? She didn't immediately respond in the way that she ended up doing. So, less surprised by my father, but pretty much having to stare the truth in the face about how my parents choose to show up in the world is like the headline for me, and really coming to terms with the fact that they are multifaceted, complex beings that taught me a lot. Truly, I mean, in many ways gave me a brilliant education.
Yeah.
And are cruel, and are also cruel in their own way. So having to hold that and look that complexity in the face has been, I think, the main lesson of my year.
I don't know if you had seen your parents react this way to other friends of theirs that may have come out, or people in New Orleans that they learned were gay or bisexual, and if they cut them out, so therefore this is how they react to people who come out to them, or they know that they're gay. In their mind, they view this as akin to you being engaged in some sort of criminal behavior. Like, how do you?
Well, it's just a sin. It's a sin because the Bible says it's a sin. That is their cut and dry logic.
Yeah, and that's all that's needed to be known.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How have you tried? If you have, I think you alluded to this. It's ironic that this is happening to you, given that so much of your life has been spent dealing with conflict resolution.
Yes.
And with navigating very emotional.
Very synchronous.
Yes.
Yeah.
How you maybe have applied some of your own experience to this. And maybe for now, there is nothing to do other than wait. It doesn't seem like your parents are interested in engaging in conversation.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people tell me that they, like when I share this story with them, a lot of people insist that my parents will come around. And I'm like, I have no idea why you think that, or what makes you think that. And I have no, there's no rhyme or reason for me to like hold on to that.
Yeah.
I know my parents, they're very religious. Like that is the dominant mode of their life. So I recognize that I pose a very strong challenge to everything that they believe in, right? Because for them to come around and accept me, they would have to seriously dissolve some of the ways that they've been living their own life and the ways that they relate to the divine and the ways that they relate to the concept of God. Like they would have to radically reconfigure the way they move in the world. And I know, because of what I've been teaching for the past 6 years, I know and I understand on a deep level how hard it is to do that.
Yeah.
And that is not me making an excuse.
Yeah.
That is just me
Being realistic.
not just being realistic, but like allowing the hue of compassion that is in me to shine through. I also have a hue of anger, and I have a hue of sorrow, and I have a hue of rage that I could also speak from, but I am actively choosing not to speak from that in this conversation right now.
I know you're getting into various different kinds of artistic expression at this point. Have you primarily viewed yourself as a storyteller, as a conversation holder? What is the, for most of your career, how have you thought about yourself as an artist, if you have?
I didn't feel I had full permission to think of myself as an artist only recently, until recently. So I would like to think of myself as a storyteller. And, I love the Emerald podcast. It's one of my favorite podcasts. And there's the host is a storyteller, essentially. And I've always I remember like being in elementary school and loving storytelling, or again, English literature, right? Yeah. These are the things that I gravitated towards. So yeah, I am a storyteller in a sense, and I never necessarily thought of myself explicitly in those words. Also, when you ask someone what comes to mind when you think of an artist, my first inclination would not be to say storyteller, it would be to say musician or painter, but I think storytelling is really important and a crucial, like the craft of storytelling is actually a crucial thing missing from the culture. It's like a lost art in the broader culture. And so I will have to see how that, I'll have to spend some time with that word to see how it lands in my body, but I like it. And I'm curious to see how it'll become me and how I'll become it and the weaving of that and how that will unfold.
I always love to end conversations by talking about the concept of success. And I know you're in a transitionary phase in many ways, it sounds like right now in life and in your career. If we were to meet in a year or two, and if you think about where you're heading, where you want to go, in the near term for you over the next few years, how do you think about the word success? What does success look like and mean to you as it applies to your life and your work?
I love this question. Okay, so here's what it looks like. In a year, I am a world touring DJ making 6 figures for my sets. And I'm also a singer-songwriter, occasionally doing pop-up shows of my own music that I've produced in select cities. And I'm just creating all the time. And it feels amazing. And my ability to draw people in with storytelling is just, I'm at the top of my game. That's what success looks like for me.
Chloé, thank you for doing this.
Thank you.